The manager won't pay my mom.
How long has this been going on?
Since before my birthday. She can't say anything because he said he'll fire her.
Does your mom know you're telling me this?
No, she always says be quiet.
A 10-year-old black girl said all of that, unprompted, unafraid, to a white customer she'd never met, in a grocery store in Decatur, Georgia. She didn't know who he was. Nobody in that store did. 72 hours later, that man came back, wearing an employee uniform, a fake name badge, and a secret that would turn that store inside out. Yeah, that little conversation changed everything. Let's see what happens. But before that satisfying moment, before the fake badge, before the uniform, before everything unraveled, this story started the way most injustices do. Quietly, slowly, one paycheck at a time. Brenda Taylor had worked at Garrison's Family Grocery in Decatur, Georgia for 6 years. Deli counter, stocking shelves, running the register when someone called in sick. Whatever needed doing, Brenda did it, and she did it without complaint. She was the first one customers asked for at the deli. "Nobody slices it like you do," a regular once told her. She'd smile, adjust her gloves, and keep going. That was Brenda. Head down, hands moving, always moving. She was also a single mother. Her daughter Zoe was 10, sharp, quiet, and old enough to understand things a 10-year-old shouldn't have to understand. Like why her mother left for work at 7 in the morning and sometimes didn't come home until after 11 at night. Like why there was never enough in the fridge by Thursday. Like why Mama's voice got tight and flat whenever she talked about a man named Greg. Greg Hollister had been the store manager for 3 years, mid-40s, khaki pants, a name badge clipped crooked on his chest, and a coffee mug on his desk that read, "Number 1 Boss." He kept that mug front and center, turned it toward the door so anyone walking in would see it. He arrived late most mornings, 10:30 for an 8 o'clock shift, sometimes later. Nobody said a word. He spent his afternoons in his office with the door closed, feet up, scrolling his phone. When Brenda knocked on that door, which she had done 4 times in the past 5 months, he didn't look up. He'd wave one hand toward the hallway and mouth the same word every time. Tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Because Greg Hollister had been stealing from Brenda Taylor. Not with a gun, not with a threat, with something quieter, a timesheet. Every week, a printed employee timesheet went up on the corkboard in the break room. Names down the left, days across the top, hours filled in by hand. It was simple, old-fashioned, and easy to change if you were the only person with access to the schedule system. Greg was that person. For 5 months, Brenda had watched her hours shrink. Overtime she worked disappeared from the sheet. Friday shifts she covered alone were logged as 0. Double shifts became single shifts. And her paycheck, the one she needed for rent, for groceries, for Zoe's school supplies, came in short. Every time. She kept track. Not because anyone told her to, because something felt wrong, and she didn't trust anyone enough to say it out loud. Every Friday after her shift, she pulled out her phone, walked to the break room, and photographed the timesheet on the wall. She didn't know what she'd do with those photos. She just knew she needed them. One night, a Friday in late September, Brenda sat in the break room after closing and opened the calculator on her phone. She added up every missing hour from the photos she'd taken, every shorted shift, every overtime that vanished. $4,200. She stared at the number. Her rent was $1,100 a month. That missing money was almost 4 months of keeping a roof over Zoe's head. She thought about calling the corporate employee hotline, the number posted on the break room bulletin board, right next to the timesheet. But Greg had told the whole staff 3 months ago that the hotline had been shut down for system upgrades. He said it casually, like it was nothing. Everyone believed him. Brenda believed him. She put her phone away, grabbed her bag, walked to the parking lot. It was 10:15 at night. Zoe was in the back seat of their 12-year-old Honda Civic, asleep. Her backpack tucked under her head like a pillow, A juice box squeezed empty on the seat beside her. Math homework half finished on her lap. Brenda stood outside the car for a moment, didn't open the door, just breathed. Then she drove home. Zoe woke up halfway there. "Did you get paid today, Mama?" Brenda's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We're okay, baby." She passed a gas station on the way home. Didn't stop. The tank was a quarter full, had to last until Monday. Zoe looked out the window. "Mama, if they don't pay you, why do you keep going?" Brenda didn't answer. She turned onto their street, pulled into the driveway, and sat there for a second. Engine running, headlights on, daughter waiting, and said nothing. Some questions don't have answers. Not yet. But they would. To understand what happened that Wednesday evening, you have to understand something about Zoe Taylor first. She wasn't the kind of child who talked to strangers. Brenda had raised her careful. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't take things from people you don't know. And above all, if something's wrong at home or at work or anywhere else, be quiet about it. Don't make trouble. Don't give anyone a reason. Zoe followed that rule. For months, she followed it. She sat in the break room after school, doing homework while her mother worked double shifts. She ate whatever was in the vending machine for dinner, usually a bag of chips and a juice box. She heard Greg's voice through the walls, loud and sharp, and she heard her mother's voice after, quiet, tight, swallowed. She saw the timesheet on the corkboard, and she didn't understand the numbers, but she understood her mother's face when she looked at them. She understood the fridge getting emptier. She understood the lights flickering once last month before Mama paid the bill just in time. She understood falling asleep in the back seat of the Honda and waking up on the couch at home with her shoes still on because Mama was too tired to take them off. Zoe understood all of it. She just never said anything. Until that Wednesday. It was an ordinary evening, about 6:30. The store was in its post-dinner lull. Maybe a dozen customers spread across the aisles. No rush, no noise. Brenda was behind the deli counter, slicing ham for a short line. No help. There was never any help. She pushed hair off her forehead with the back of her wrist because her hands were gloved, and she kept going. Zoe sat on a plastic milk crate at the end of the deli counter. Her homework was done. She was drawing on the back of a delivery receipt with a stubby pencil. A house with a big yard, 2 windows, a front door, and a dog sitting by the steps. A house that looked nothing like the apartment they lived in. A man walked through the deli area pushing a half-full cart. Gray polo shirt, mid-60s. Paper towels, ground beef, a bag of apples. He moved slowly, the way people do when they're not in a hurry and not looking for anything in particular. He paused near the pre-made salads, glanced at the deli line, and noticed Brenda working alone. His brow furrowed slightly, just for a second, like a man doing math in his head. Then he noticed the girl on the milk crate. He smiled. Not a big smile, just polite, the kind you give a kid you pass in a store. "That's a pretty good drawing." Zoe looked down at her receipt, then back at him. "It's our house, but bigger." He chuckled softly. "I like it." He was about to push his cart forward. His hand was already moving. And then Zoe spoke again. Not because she planned to, not because anyone told her to, but because she'd been sitting on that crate for an hour, watching her mother work alone for the 1,000th time, and the man in front of her had kind eyes, and he'd stopped, actually stopped, and said something nice. And that was enough. "The manager won't pay my mom." The man's hand stilled on the cart. "She works here every day. She works more than anybody, but he won't pay her right, and she can't say anything because he said he'll fire her." The man didn't crouch down, didn't make a face. He turned slowly and looked at Zoe directly. Something behind his eyes shifted. Not anger, not pity, something sharper. "How long has this been going on?" "Since before my birthday, March." "Does your mom know you're telling me this?" Zoe shook her head. "She'd tell me to be quiet. She always says, be quiet." A pause. The refrigeration units hummed. A register beeped somewhere far away. Zoe, that's your name? She nodded. Zoe, thank you for telling me that. That was very brave. She shrugged the way kids do when they don't know they've just changed everything. Are you going to help her? The man looked toward the deli counter. Brenda was handing a wrapped package to a customer, smiling, tired. She hadn't noticed the conversation. She was too busy being the only person doing her job. He looked back at Zoe. I'm going to find out what's going on. I promise you that. He pushed his cart to the checkout, paid, walked out with 2 bags. Zoe went back to her drawing. Brenda finished her shift, collected her daughter, and drove home. She never knew the conversation happened. But in the parking lot, the man sat in his car for a long time. He didn't start the engine. He stared at the store sign through the windshield, the sign that read, Garrison's Family Grocery, in green block letters. A sign he'd paid for himself 22 years ago. Then he pulled out his phone. Sandra, I need the Decatur store's quarterly numbers on my desk by morning. Labor, turnover, complaints, everything. He started the engine, pulled out of the lot. The store's lights glowed smaller in his rearview mirror. Inside, Zoe was adding a chimney to her house. Okay, but think about this. A kid just told a random stranger her mom's business. No filter, no fear. Now here's the thing. If you were that man, standing there with a shopping cart full of groceries, what do you do with that? Walk away? Call someone? Or do something crazy? Warren Caldwell didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, a small room with bookshelves and a framed photograph on the wall of a single storefront grocery store taken in 2004. The paint on the sign was still wet in that photo. He'd hung it himself. That was Garrison's. Day 1. 1 store, 6 employees, and a 19-year-old kid who stocked shelves until midnight because he couldn't afford to hire anyone else. 22 years later, there were 4 stores and 63 employees. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped visiting, stopped checking, trusted the managers he'd put in place, and read their quarterly reports like scripture. Greg Hollister's reports had been glowing. Outstanding cost management. Labor efficiency up 12%. Warren had read those words and felt good about them. Now, with a 10-year-old girl's voice in his head, he wasn't so sure. Sandra's email came at 6 a.m., a spreadsheet of the Decatur store's quarterly data. Warren opened it and leaned forward. The numbers didn't add up. Labor costs had dropped 22% in 6 months. That looked like efficiency, until you saw that customer complaints had risen 40% in the same period. Employee turnover was the highest in the chain. 5 people had quit in 8 months. Not a single exit interview on file. He pulled up Greg's personnel profile. 3 years. Self-evaluations, all outstanding. No complaints. No disciplinary actions. Too clean. Warren picked up his phone. Sandra, clear my schedule Monday through Wednesday. For what? I'm going to work the floor at the Decatur store. No announcement, no heads up to the manager. Warren, you haven't done a floor shift in 8 years. What's going on? A 10-year-old girl told me something last night. I want to see if she's right. What did she say? He looked at the framed photo on the wall, the wet paint, the first shelf he ever stocked. She said the manager won't pay her mom. He hung up. Walked to the hallway closet. In the back, behind winter coats, he found it. A plain Navy Garrison's employee polo. He'd kept it for 20 years. Faded at the collar. Soft from 100 washes. He put it on. It still fit. Monday morning, he would walk into that store as Bill, produce section, temporary transfer. Nobody would know his face. He'd never once visited the Decatur location in person during Greg's 3-year tenure. That was about to change. Meanwhile, 12 miles away, Brenda Taylor sat at her kitchen table after putting Zoe to bed. Almost midnight. Phone out. Timesheet photos on the screen. A fresh notebook open in front of her. She wrote the date at the top, then a header in neat block letters. Week 1. She didn't know anyone was coming to help. She was building her own case, alone. the same way she did everything else. Monday morning, 7 a.m. A man in a navy polo and a name badge that read Bill, Produce, walked through the employee entrance of Garrison's Family Grocery in Decatur, Georgia. He carried a lunch bag. He wore work boots. He looked like every other temporary transfer corporate had ever sent to help with holiday prep. Nobody looked twice. The morning crew was small, 4 people on the floor, 1 at the register, and Brenda already behind the deli counter, setting up trays before the store opened. Warren, Bill, clocked in at the break room time station, hung his jacket on an empty hook, and turned to look at the corkboard. The timesheet was right there. He stepped closer. Names down the left side, hours filled in by hand. He scanned the columns slowly. 3 names had hours crossed out in blue ink and rewritten in black. Different handwriting, different pen. He took a photo with his phone and put it back in his pocket. Then he went to stock bananas. Greg Hollister arrived at 10:30, 2.5 hours late for an 8 o'clock shift. He walked through the front entrance with a coffee in one hand and his "Number One Boss" mug in the other, nodded at the cashier, and disappeared into his office. The door closed. Nobody said a word. Nobody looked surprised. Warren noted the time, wrote it on the back of a produce receipt. By noon, the deli counter had a line 12 customers deep. Brenda worked it alone, slicing, wrapping, weighing, smiling, calling the next number. No one came to help her. Warren watched from behind a pyramid of oranges. She moved like a machine, fast, precise, no wasted motion. She'd been doing this for 6 years, and it showed in every cut. She didn't complain. She didn't slow down. She just kept going. A regular customer leaned over the counter. "Nobody slices it like you do, Brenda." She smiled. First real smile Warren had seen from her all day. "Thank you, sweetheart. Same as always? Thin sliced?" Warren looked at the deli line, then at Greg's closed office door, then back at Brenda. 1 woman, 12 customers, a manager 50 feet away doing nothing. He added another note to the receipt. That was Monday. Tuesday, the pattern sharpened. Warren noticed the shift schedule posted inside the binder behind the customer service desk. He flipped through it during his break. Greg had given the 2 best shifts, weekday mornings, light traffic, easy work, to 2 employees Warren didn't recognize. He asked a cashier about them. "Oh, those are Greg's buddies. They don't really do much, but they always get the good hours." Brenda, meanwhile, was on her 6th consecutive closing shift. She should have rotated out 3 days ago. Nobody rotated her. Tuesday afternoon. Warren was restocking canned goods near the stockroom when he heard Greg's voice through the wall. On the phone. Loud enough to hear clearly. "Don't worry about the labor budget. I've got it handled. Numbers will look great for quarterly." Warren stood still. He set down the can of tomatoes in his hand very carefully, pulled out his phone, wrote the quote down word for word. That evening, Brenda opened her locker in the break room. A folded piece of paper fell out. No name, no signature, just 1 line in pencil. "You're not the only one. Check the timesheets from March." March, the same month Zoe had mentioned. 2 independent sources pointing to the same date. Brenda read the note twice, folded it, put it in her apron pocket. She didn't look around. She didn't ask anyone. She just put it away and went back to work. Warren spent the last hour of his Tuesday shift trying to access the digital time tracking system on the break room computer. Password locked. A prompt on the screen read, "Manager authorization required." Only Greg had the code. Every edit, every override, every change to an employee's hours, all of it ran through one man's login. That was Tuesday. Wednesday broke everything open. It started at 9 a.m. Rosa Fuentes, a stalker in her early 30s, quiet, reliable, always on time, walked into Greg's office with a printed PTO request form. Her daughter had a doctor's appointment on Friday. She needed 4 hours off. Greg didn't look up from his phone. "Find coverage or don't come back." Rosa stood there for a moment. Her mouth opened, then closed. She walked out. Warren was stacking cereal boxes 3 aisles away. He saw her face when she came through the door. She wasn't angry. She was resigned. Like this had happened before, and she already knew the answer before she asked. 11 a.m. Warren walked past the dairy cooler and heard something. Soft, muffled. He slowed down. Through the cooler door, he could see 2 figures. Denise Palmer, a woman he'd met on Monday, overnight stalker, been at the store 9 years, was sitting on an upturned crate between the milk pallets, crying. Not loud. The kind of crying you do when you've learned to keep it quiet. Brenda was sitting next to her, not talking, just holding her hand. After a long moment, Denise whispered, "He cut my hours again. 3rd time this month. I can't make rent, Brenda. 9 years I've been here. 9 years." Brenda squeezed her hand, said nothing. There was nothing to say that would fix it, so she just stayed. Warren stepped back from the door. He didn't interrupt, but he stood in that aisle for a full minute, staring at a row of yogurt cups, his jaw tight. 2:30 p.m. Brenda was in the break room on her 15-minute break when she saw it happen in real time. Greg walked in, pulled the printed timesheet off the corkboard, and carried it into his office. The door closed. 5 minutes later, he came back out and pinned the sheet to the board again. Same paper, different numbers. Brenda had her phone in her hand. She photographed the board before he took it. She photographed it again after he put it back. 2 photos, same timesheet, different hours, time-stamped, 4 minutes apart. 30 minutes later, Warren took out the trash from the break room. On his way past Greg's office, he glanced into the wastebasket by the door. A crumpled piece of paper sat on top. He reached in, pulled it out, and smoothed it flat against his leg. It was an earlier version of the same timesheet, the original numbers, before the edit. He folded it carefully and put it inside his shirt pocket. 2 pieces of evidence. 2 people. Neither knew about the other. That evening, Brenda and Warren were the last 2 employees on the floor. Closing shift. The store was empty, lights dimmed to half. They mopped side by side, Brenda starting from the deli end, Warren from produce, meeting somewhere around aisle 5. Brenda looked at him. He was mopping the corners, the tight spaces behind the shelf legs where dust collected, where most people dragged the mop past without stopping. "You mop the corners," she said. "Most guys they send skip them." Warren pushed the mop into the last corner of the aisle, wrung it out. "Corners matter." Brenda almost smiled. Almost. Then she went back to mopping. They didn't say anything else. 2 people fighting the same fight, standing 3 feet apart, and neither one knew it. The audience did. And that silence, that invisible connection, was louder than any conversation. At 9:45, Warren hung up his apron, walked to the parking lot, and sat in his car. The store sign glowed green against the dark sky. He pulled out the crumpled timesheet, unfolded it, looked at the numbers. Then he pulled out his phone. "Sandra, I need the full payroll records for the Decatur store. Every edit log, every override, 12 months, by Friday morning." "Warren, what did you find?" "Enough. Get me those records." He hung up, started the engine. But he didn't pull out right away. He sat there thinking about a woman who mopped the floor of a store that stole from her and still got the corners right. And a little girl on a milk crate who trusted a stranger with the truth because nobody else would listen. Friday couldn't come fast enough. Friday morning, 5:58 a.m. Warren sat in his home office with a cup of coffee going cold beside his laptop. Sandra's email had landed 12 minutes ago. Subject line: Decatur. Payroll audit. Confidential. He opened the attachment. The spreadsheet was long, rows and rows of names, dates, shift codes, and logged hours. Sandra's team had flagged the anomalies in red. There was a lot of red. 86 manual time edits in 11 months. Every single one made from Greg Hollister's login. Every single one reduced an employee's hours. 6 names appeared over and over. Brenda Taylor, Denise Palmer, Rosa Fuentes, and 3 others. The total amount shorted across all 6 employees, $23,400. Warren scrolled slowly. He cross-referenced the edits with the crumpled timesheet he'd pulled from the trash. The numbers matched. Every alteration on paper lined up with a digital override in the system. Greg wasn't just sloppy, he was consistent. He'd built a routine out of stealing. Then Warren found something worse. Buried in the payroll data, Sandra's team had flagged a name that didn't match any employee on file. A Thomas Bockley, scheduled for 16 hours a week, every week for the past 8 months. Paychecks issued bi-weekly. Direct deposit to a bank account that didn't belong to any Garrison's employee. It belonged to Greg Hollister. Warren leaned back in his chair, took a breath. This wasn't a manager cutting corners to hit his numbers. This was a man who had created a ghost, a fake employee, a phantom on the payroll, and had been cashing checks in that ghost's name for 8 months. Wage theft and embezzlement, a two-front con. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again, called Sandra. "I've read it." "And?" "It's worse than I thought. He's not just shaving hours. He built a phantom employee. 16 hours a week going into his own account." Sandra was quiet for a moment. "Warren, that's criminal." "I know. Set up a meeting at the store, Monday, 2 p.m. I'll handle it personally. No warning. No heads up to anyone at Decatur." "Understood." He hung up, closed the laptop, looked at the framed photo on the wall, the wet paint, the first shelf, the kid who believed that if you treated people right, they'd build something with you. Greg Hollister had turned that belief into a lie. Monday, 2 p.m. It was coming. 12 miles away, at the same hour, Brenda Taylor was on her 15-minute break in the break room. She had her phone in her hand. She was staring at a number on the screen, the corporate employee hotline. The one Greg told everyone had been disconnected 3 months ago for system upgrades. She'd believed him. Everyone had. But the anonymous note had shaken something loose. "You're not the only one." If someone else was watching, if someone else knew, then maybe the system wasn't as broken as Greg said it was. She pressed call. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. "Garrison's Grocery Employee Services, how can I help you?" Brenda's hand went to her mouth, not crying, relieved. The line worked. It had always worked. 3 years of system upgrades, a lie so simple that nobody had ever tested it. She reported everything. The missing hours, the altered timesheets, the threats. Greg's exact words. "One more complaint and I write you up." The operator listened, took notes, and gave her a case number. When she hung up, her hands were shaking, but her back was straight. 30 seconds later, Denise Palmer sat down across from her. No greeting, no small talk. She looked at Brenda and said, "I wrote that note." Brenda stared at her. "I wrote it because I've been watching him do the same thing to me for 2 years. I have photos too, different dates, same pattern." Denise pulled out her phone, opened her gallery, turned the screen toward Brenda. Dozens of photos, timesheets, schedule printouts, text messages from Greg changing her shifts at the last minute. Brenda pulled out her own phone, opened the folder labeled Receipts. 43 photos. They laid both phones on the break room table, side by side. 2 women who'd been fighting alone, looking at the same evidence from 2 different angles. Denise's eyes were wet. "I should have said something sooner. I was afraid he'd take what was left of my hours." Brenda reached across the table and put her hand on Denise's. "You said something now. That's what counts." Neither of them knew that 12 miles away, a man with a laptop and a payroll audit had just found the same truth from the top down. 3 investigations, corporate, grassroots, and a child's honesty, all pointing at the same man. Monday was 2 days away, and Greg Hollister had no idea what was coming. Monday, 2 p.m. The automatic doors of Garrison's Family Grocery slid open, and a man walked in. He was wearing a navy Garrison's polo, The same one he'd worn all last week. Same work boots, same calm walk. But something was different. The employees who recognized Bill from the produce section noticed it right away. He wasn't pushing a cart. He wasn't heading for the bananas. He walked through the front entrance like he owned the place. Because he did. Clipped to his chest was a name badge. Not the one that said, Bill, Produce. A different one. White background, black letters, a logo at the top. Warren Caldwell, owner, Garrison's Family Grocery. He walked past the registers, past the bakery, past the deli counter where Brenda was serving a customer. He didn't stop. He didn't look left or right. He walked straight to the back of the store, down the narrow hallway past the stockroom, and stopped in front of a door with a plastic nameplate that read, Manager, Greg Hollister. He knocked once, opened it without waiting. Greg was leaning back in his chair, phone in one hand, coffee mug in the other. The number 1 boss mug, right there on the desk where it always was. He looked up, saw the polo, saw Bill. Hey, Bill, right? This area's for management only. You can't just... Warren reached up and unclipped the name badge from his chest, set it on the desk, face up, right next to the mug. Greg looked down, read the name, read it again. The color left his face in stages. First the cheeks, then the lips, then everything else. His phone hand dropped to the armrest. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Warren didn't sit down. He reached into the folder he was carrying and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. Placed them side by side on Greg's desk. This one, Warren said, tapping the left sheet, is the timesheet I pulled from your trash last Wednesday. The original, before you changed it. He tapped the right sheet. This one is the version you put back on the break room wall 5 minutes later. Different numbers, same date. Greg's eyes moved between the 2 sheets. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek. There must be a system error. The scheduling software has bugs, and I've been meaning to... Warren opened his laptop on the desk, turned it to face Greg. The spreadsheet filled the screen, rows highlighted in red, column after column of manual overrides. 86 edits, Greg, all from your login, all reducing hours for the same 6 employees, over 11 months, $23,000. Greg's chair creaked as he shifted his weight. His eyes darted to the door. And then there's Thomas Barkley. Greg went still. 16 hours a week, 8 months, direct deposit to an account in your name. Except Thomas Barkley doesn't exist. He's never existed. You made him up and you've been cashing his checks. Greg's mouth opened again. Closed. His hand tightened around the mug. The office door was open. It had been open the entire time. And by now, the sound of Warren's voice, calm, steady, carrying, had drawn people to the hallway. Sandra from HR appeared in the doorway with 2 folders and a security consultant beside her. She nodded at Warren. He nodded back. Behind Sandra, employees had gathered. The cashiers, 2 stalkers, Rosa Fuentes, standing against the wall with her arms crossed. Denise Palmer, hands clasped in front of her, eyes wide. And Brenda Taylor. She had stepped away from the deli counter and pushed through to the front of the small crowd. She saw the laptop. She saw the 2 timesheets on the desk. She saw Sandra. She saw the security consultant. Then she saw the name badge on the desk, the one that said Warren Caldwell, owner. Her lips parted. Her hand came up slowly to the front of her apron, the pocket where her phone had been all week, where 43 photos lived inside a folder called Receipts. Bill? Warren turned. He looked at her. And for the first time since he walked into this store as a stranger 3 weeks ago, he spoke to her not as Bill from produce, but as the man who owned every shelf she'd stocked, every counter she'd wiped, every hour she'd been cheated out of. My name is Warren Caldwell. I own this store. And everything you documented, I documented it too. Brenda stared at him, her breath caught. Then Warren said something that made every person in that hallway go silent. Your daughter told me something a few weeks ago. She was sitting on a milk crate near the deli, drawing a picture of a house, and she looked up at me and said, "The manager won't pay my mom. She works here every day. She works more than anybody." Brenda's hand moved from her apron to her chest. She didn't know who I was. She just needed somebody to listen. And I want you to know, I listened. He paused, looked at the gathered employees, then back at Brenda. Everything that happened, the investigation, the audit, my being here right now, started because a 10-year-old girl was braver than every adult in this building, including me. He turned to face the full group. Greg sat behind him, small in his chair, the mug staring back at no one. I built this store 22 years ago with my own hands. Every shelf, every register, every break room coffee pot. I built it so the people who work here can feed their families. That's the only reason this place exists. And when someone in a position of trust steals from you, they steal from me. And when a child has to be the one to tell me the truth, that means I failed you. He let the words land. I won't fail you again. No one moved. Denise had both hands over her mouth. Rose's arms had dropped to her sides. A cashier at the back of the group wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. Greg Hollister sat in his chair, staring at the 2 timesheets on his desk, the laptop screen glowing red beside them, and a mug that suddenly didn't mean what it used to. He had nothing left to say. The first thing that happened was quiet. Sandra stepped into Greg's office and closed the door. Not a slam, a click. The kind of sound that means the conversation is over and the paperwork has begun. Through the glass, employees could see Greg sitting across from Sandra and the security consultant, his hands on the desk, his head down. 15 minutes later, the door opened. Greg walked out carrying a cardboard box, a framed photo, a phone charger, a bag of peanuts from his drawer, and sitting on top, the #1 boss mug. He walked through the store slowly, past the stockroom, past the break room, past the deli counter where Brenda had worked 11-hour shifts alone because he'd decided her time wasn't worth paying for, past the registers where cashiers watched him go without a word. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody gloated. The store was silent except for the hum of the refrigeration units and the beep of a scanner at Register 3, where a customer was buying milk and had no idea what was happening. Greg pushed through the front doors and crossed the parking lot. Sandra and the security consultant followed at a distance. He put the box in his trunk, got in, drove away. The mug rattled against the side of the box when he turned the corner. That was accountability. Not revenge. Not spectacle. Just a man leaving a building he no longer had the right to be in. 20 minutes later, Warren Caldwell stood at the front of the break room. No podium, no microphone, no slide deck. Just a man in a polo shirt standing in front of a corkboard, speaking to every employee in the store. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. No corporate language, no spin, just the truth. He told them everything. The altered timesheets, 86 edits over 11 months. The phantom employee, a fake name on the payroll, checks going into Greg's personal account. The stolen hours from 6 employees. The grievance hotline that Greg told everyone was disconnected. That line has been active for 3 years. It was never shut down. You were lied to. And I'm sorry I didn't find out sooner. That's on me. He let the silence hold. Here's what happens next. First, restitution. Every dollar stolen from every affected employee would be deposited into their accounts within 2 pay cycles. The full amount, with interest. When he said, with interest, Denise Palmer put both hands over her face. Rosa Fuentes grabbed the arm of the woman next to her. A stalker in the back row closed his eyes and took a long breath. These weren't numbers on a corporate spreadsheet. These were rent payments, grocery runs, doctor visits, car repairs put off for months because the money wasn't there. Second, systems. All time tracking would move to digital with employee verification. Every worker would confirm their own hours before payroll processed. No single manager could edit a timesheet without second authorization from HR. No one person should ever have that much unchecked power over your livelihood, Warren said. That was a failure of my system, not just one man. Third, oversight. Warren would visit all 4 locations at least once a month. Unannounced, no schedule. And every store would have a direct line to his office, not a call center, his office. If something is wrong, I want to hear it from you, not from a spreadsheet, and not from a 10-year-old girl who shouldn't have had to carry that weight. He looked at Brenda. The room shifted. Everyone followed his gaze. This store needs a new manager, someone the team trusts, someone who knows every aisle, every shelf, every customer who walks through that door. He took a step toward her. I watched you work for 3 days, Ms. Taylor. I watched you run that deli counter alone, 12 deep without slowing down. I watched you hold a coworker's hand in the dairy cooler when she needed someone. I watched you mop the corners of every aisle at 10 at night when nobody was looking. He extended his hand. The position is yours if you want it. The break room was still. Denise was looking at Brenda. Rosa was looking at Brenda. Every face in the room was turned toward her. She didn't answer right away. She looked at Denise. 9 years, invisible, finally seen. She looked at Rosa, whose daughter's doctor appointment had been denied by a man who no longer worked here. She looked at the faces of people who had been afraid to speak, afraid to push back, afraid to lose what little they had. Then she looked at Warren. I'll take it. A breath moved through the room. One condition. Warren tilted his head. Name it. Brenda's voice was steady, clear. Nobody closes alone. Not in my store. Warren looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. That's exactly why you're right for this. He shook her hand. The room exhaled. Denise let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Rosa uncrossed her arms for the first time in an hour. Brenda turned to the corkboard. The old timesheet was still pinned there. Greg's handwriting, crossed out hours, ink that didn't match. She pulled it down, folded it, set it aside. Sandra handed her a fresh sheet. Clean, printed. A new header at the top. All schedule changes require dual authorization. W.C. Brenda pinned it to the board. Denise walked past, reached up and tapped the board twice with her knuckle. Didn't say a word. Just smiled. Rosa adjusted her name badge, straightened it on her chest, centered even, the way it should have been all along. 3 weeks later, Brenda Taylor arrived at Garrison's Family Grocery at 7:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before her shift. Not because anyone told her to, because she wanted to walk the floor before the store opened, check the displays, scan the schedule, make sure the deli had enough hands for the lunch rush. She walked through the front door and the cashier at Register 1 looked up. "Morning, Miss Taylor." Brenda smiled. She still wasn't used to that. Ms. Taylor. 3 weeks, and it still landed somewhere between strange and earned. She walked the aisles the way she always had. Except now she wasn't stocking shelves or mopping floors. She was looking at the whole picture. End caps straight. Price tags current. Cooler doors sealed. She stopped at the produce section and adjusted a stack of apples that was leaning slightly to the left. Old habit. Some things don't leave you just because your title changes. She found Rosa in the stockroom, scanning inventory on a handheld. "How's your daughter doing?" Rosa looked up. It took her a second to register the question, not because she didn't hear it, but because no manager had ever asked before. "She's good. The doctor said her ear infection cleared up. Thank you for asking." Brenda nodded. "Good. Take your full lunch today. You earned it." Rosa went back to scanning, but she was smiling. A small thing, the kind of thing that doesn't show up on a quarterly report, but changes how a person feels about walking into work. 1 month in. The Employee of the Month wall in the break room had been repainted. Fresh white background, new frames. And the first photo in the top left corner, Denise Palmer, grinning, holding a $50 gift card in one hand and trying not to cry with the other. She'd found out that morning. Brenda had posted the announcement on the break room board before the opening shift. When Denise walked in at 6 a.m. and saw her own face on the wall, she stopped in the doorway, put her hand on the frame, stood there for a long time. 9 years, she said to no one in particular. 9 years and nobody ever put my face on that wall. A stalker walking past heard her. He didn't say anything, just patted her on the shoulder and kept going. That was enough. 6 weeks in, a Tuesday afternoon, the automatic doors slid open and a man walked in pushing an empty shopping cart. Gray polo shirt, work boots, no name badge. He grabbed a basket, picked through the apples and produce, squeezing them gently the way someone does when they actually know what they're looking for, and made his way to the deli counter. There was no line. Brenda was behind the glass, arranging the cold cuts display. She looked up and saw him. Her face broke into a grin. "Thin sliced," Warren Caldwell leaned on the counter. "Nobody slices it like you do." Brenda laughed, actually laughed, the kind that comes from the stomach, not the throat. "You used that line when you were pretending to be Bill, too." "Wasn't pretending about the turkey." She sliced him a 1/4 pound of smoked turkey, wrapped it tight, and handed it over the counter. He took it and put it in his cart next to the paper towels and ground beef. Same items as the first night he walked in. Some things don't change. He didn't announce his visit. He never did. He just shopped, said hello to a few employees, checked the break room board, and left. The store ran the same whether he was there or not. That was the point. Customer satisfaction at the Decatur location had climbed 31% in 6 weeks. Employee turnover had dropped to 0. Labor complaints, 0. Not because people stopped having problems, but because when they did, someone listened. The system worked now. Friday evening, 7 o'clock. Brenda clocked out, hung up her apron, and walked to her car. The Honda was in the same spot it always was. But tonight, the drive home was different. No 10:15 darkness, no quarter tank, no sleeping child in the back seat. She pulled into the driveway at 7:25, walked through the front door. Zoe was at the kitchen table, math homework spread out in front of her, a glass of juice beside her elbow. Not a juice box from a vending machine, a real glass, at a real table, in their home. "How was work, Mama?" Brenda hung her name badge on the hook by the door. She looked at it for a second. Brenda Taylor, store manager. Then looked at the fridge. Zoe's drawing was taped there with a piece of Scotch tape. The house with the big yard, the 2 windows, the dog by the steps. Their house, but bigger. "Good day, baby. Really good day." 4 months later, the Decatur location of Garrison's Family Grocery had the highest employee satisfaction rating in the chain. 2 of the other 3 stores adopted the dual authorization time system that Brenda helped design. Warren Caldwell still visited once a month, always unannounced, always with a shopping cart, always asking for thin-sliced turkey at the deli. Greg Hollister was facing charges for payroll fraud in DeKalb County. Brenda didn't follow the case. She didn't need to. That chapter was closed. Denise Palmer had been promoted to night shift supervisor. She ran the overnight crew the way she'd survived 9 years on the floor. Steady, quiet, reliable. Except now, when something was wrong, she said so, out loud, to someone who listened. Rosa Fuentes had enrolled in a business management course at the community college 2 miles from the store. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she left at 4 p.m. sharp. Brenda never once asked her to stay late. And Zoe Taylor still drew houses. Bigger ones now, more windows, a yard that wrapped around the side. She kept them on the fridge with Scotch tape and replaced them every few weeks. Always the same house, always a little different. Like she was building it one sketch at a time. It all started with a girl on a milk crate and a stranger with a shopping cart. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he could do. She just knew her mama was being treated wrong, and she said so, to the first person who stopped long enough to listen. Sometimes that's all it takes. Not a title, not power, just one honest voice and one person willing to hear it. I tell this story because I grew up watching my mom come home with that same look Brenda had. Too tired to talk, too proud to quit. And Zoe? That kid said what every adult was too scared to say. 10 years old, on a milk crate, braver than the whole building. That's the part that wrecks me. If someone you know has ever been cheated out of pay they earned, hours that disappeared from a timesheet, shifts that never showed up on a check, share this video with them. Not because a YouTube story fixes it, but because knowing you're not alone is where it starts. If you've been the Brenda in your own store, your own office, your own life, drop a comment. Tell us what happened. And if this story moved you, subscribe, hit the bell. We're back next week with another one. Because there are more Brendas out there, and their stories deserve to be heard.